So if you could speak to your younger self.
Be more intentional. Like, actually do the corny stuff of like, these are my goals for this year and how do I get there? And these are what values are important to me. And I'm mocking it, but it really is important. It's so corny. I used to make fun of people that would do that stuff.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Wavelength podcast. Have an amazing friend and guest, Kyle Walden, here in the studio. Let's jump right in. Kyle, awesome to have you here.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for having me, Daniel. Super excited. And this studio is like amazing. You know, when you first asked me to come on to the podcast, I was like, oh, I wonder what the production value is.
It's another level, dude.
It's another level. That's awesome.
Oh, we're really grateful for the group here that lets us host in Fearless. And dude, I love thinking about our connection, our relationship, how we've built it. Who even brought us together? Do you remember who brought us together?
It's so funny you mentioned that.
I don't remember.
My girlfriend was my girlfriend was like, how'd you and Daniel meet? I keep hearing so much about this guy, and I swear to God, I think maybe it was a sales call for alchemy or something.
I think it was.
I think it was
because I usually write it like in the notes. But dude, we've always had this like energetic spark, and I've said it's like every time we do a chat, we're both re-energized to like do more, be more, give more. And then we had that insane dinner where it literally felt like we were like caught in a friggin' black hole time warp of energy. And you just got a lot, man. You're a giver. I'm so pumped to have you here. You have every time we've talked too, you have this creative side, you have this leadership side, and then you have this dev expertise, this technical side of you. You've really engaged in being a master in life. So I'd love for you to share like what you're doing right now, how you've gotten here, a little bit of your upbringing, all that good stuff.
Totally. Yeah. And thanks for that. That's awesome. And it's totally mutual, man. Like I spend a lot of my time working remote. And so sometimes I feel like I'm talking to people, they're just avatars, right? And so it's really hard to kind of break through that and make a genuine connection. It was pretty exciting to have that with yourself. So, but yeah, like a little bit about me. I work at a company called Alchemy, Web3 infrastructure startup. Really got into the news because we were just gaining our valuation like month over month. And it was one of the crown jewels of like Web3.
Powering so many ecosystems, which I'm so blessed to do, right? It's like, I'm almost getting like an MBA of what the top teams in Web3 are doing. Right. Mm-hmm. And I had this ambitious goal when I first started, cause I have a business degree from USC, right? Cool. I'm not a technical person by any means. Right. Yeah. Well, that's cool that you've actually studied and learned that as a resource.
Absolutely. And I get to have our customers, educate me on what they're doing, why they're doing this, what their theses are in the space. And I'm very fortunate because there's so much noise that's going on in like Web3. And it's a shame because there's really a lot of people that are doing fantastic things, like truly life-changing stuff for people, and building for the long term. And unfortunately, I think you just hear like the scandalous stuff in the news most of the time. So I help lead go to market at Alchemy. I was employee number, I think like 42 or something. And now we're around like 200 employees. So
cool.
Almost been there for 3 years. It's been an awesome wild ride.
Very cool. And a little bit of upbringing too, like college, some of the things you learned growing up to doing what you did, like why did you go into business school, that type of stuff.
Yeah, I think so. It's actually really, really, it's a funny story. So, my mom took me when I was in high school, me and my twin sister, to San Francisco, and we did something called aptitude testing. I've never heard of this before, right? Fun fact, the SAT used to be called the Standard Aptitude Test. They got sued. They legally had to change it. Here's why. Because aptitudes you can't inherently improve on. Right. It's an inherent nature in you. Right. So for example,
really? Okay.
Yeah. So some people, right, like they have this incredible gift for music. Right. Mm-hmm. And some of these things they're not gonna be able to score more and better on no matter how much tutoring or guidance they get. Right. So that's why the SAT had to change its name. Anyways, I go and do that test. Right. These are some things I knew about myself already. So some of the bad things where I scored in the bottom percentile. I can't keep a rhythm. I'm tone deaf, right? I can't identify like color changes very well or something like that. My spatial awareness is is terrible. So architecture was not in the cards for me. But the things
I've never heard of an aptitude test, so this is just hilarious.
It was wild.
And they're saying you can't get better at these things.
No, this is so the thesis is generally like why you want kids to do this or your children to do this or yourself to do this if you're lost in life is think about like generally speaking, people love doing things that they are good at.
Yeah.
Where they don't
natural
have,
rhythm, natural groove.
Right.
Yep.
Like if you try and cook your like spouse dinner
Mm-hmm.
and you burn it, right? And you totally ruin it. You end up getting pizza for takeout. It's probably unlikely that you're going to say, I want to go make dinner again. Like I did so bad. I want to do this again. Right. And so that's the general idea with aptitude testing. And so where I scored really, really high at like 99 percentile was ideaphoria, which is the ability to generate rapid ideas or ideas rapidly.
Wow, cool.
The ability to kind of see what's missing. So like if you showed me a picture of a room, right? And you're like, what's missing from the room? And I'd look at it and be like, oh, there's no alarm clock or something like that, right?
Which I feel like pairs with the last one.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other part is divergent thinking in the sense of I can get from A to C without going to B, if that makes sense. So I can
or having the need to fill in all of what B is.
Exactly. And so by the way, these were their recommendations to me for professions. Some of them were pretty funny. One was a detective.
I could see you crushing that actually.
Yeah, like Magnum PI, which I thought was like kind of dated or like a weird thing.
What is that?
Yeah, Magnum PI.
Yeah,
it's like it was like a famous TV show in like the 80s or the 90s of like this, maverick detective in Miami, busting crime and like getting the girl and stuff like that. And then one of the things was sales, right?
Cool.
And so my mom did sales and marketing. She was in tech too, and so she was like, you need to do sales. You'd be a great salesperson.
That's another. I wonder how much of like I'll do some research later, but like I wonder how much these aptitude testings pull from like gene transfer from your parents. Like, I was going to ask you, is that more of your mom or your dad or?
Yeah, I think so my mom is she's an award-winning like interior designer. So she's good at spatial awareness. Okay. And probably colors. But like my dad's terrible at it. Yep. Right. So I think I have like a little bit of a mix from both sides, which I guess would make sense. But so that was what was really good. So when I got to USC, when I got to college, business school, that was obviously what I was going to do. And then sales was, being people facing was what I was destined to
revenue
do.
Solves all problems. Sales is like one of the most interesting and unique, amazing things. I feel like I learned sales working at a restaurant, working at P.F. Chang's.
Yeah.
Because you are selling each table and you're learning how to maneuver and manage personalities. And it's one of my most exciting things because you can't also sell something you don't believe in. It's very hard to, at least with your personality, I can't see you. So when did you get the conviction for alchemy? Did you start in sales? Talk a little about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I remember I was in college. I was graduating college, right? Mm-hmm. And it was like the career fair stuff, right? So this is how I got into sales. And I remember because I was young and dumb, right? Mm-hmm. I really it was like the same thing in college. Like I want to get into a top 25 school, I don't want to, right? I'd be embarrassed if I didn't, that type of thing. Oh, she got into Harvard, I didn't, right? And so at the time, especially at USC,
man, you had so much bigger goals than I had. I was just like, I gotta go to college for dude. Keep going.
Well, like I knew the game.
It's cool that you had that aspiration though. Like already you can see you were like setting the bar high early.
Well, my like smooth brain, like low IQ, high level thinking was like, okay, you do well in high school, you do the tests, you get into a good college, and then you get a good job that pays you good money.
It's a video game. It's game theory 101.
Right. And I didn't think much more than that. Right. Which like, it's amazing it worked out for me. So, but when I was in college, right, the best job, the most prestigious job was to be a business consultant at like a Deloitte.
Yeah.
Like a EY.
Right.
Yeah. You should have seen it, man.
That was hot for a while.
It was hot. It was, you know what it was? It was like American Psycho when they're talking about the business cards, right?
Mhm.
And they're flashing around, oh, I got the final round interview. So anyways, I get the final round interview at Deloitte. I don't get it. BTA, I'm crushed. Because I wanted the expense account. I wanted to travel, I don't even need an apartment in the city. I'm gone most of the time, right? Like that life. Because it makes you feel important when you're young, right? And so I didn't get it. And I get into my safety job, which was Oracle. I started,
No way.
I started Oracle in the class of sales.
Sick.
I become like the number one rep.
I was gonna say not a bad gig.
No, not at all. And actually, so stupid of me to think about what it was, right? And I became like the fastest promotion from BDR into like an AE, like a closing role. In
Makes sense too.
In the program history, I become like the number one rep, if not like the top rep in North America, my first year in closing. So I just crush it, right? So I go from big company Oracle to another big company Salesforce, and meanwhile,
wow, that's sweet.
This Web3 stuff is taking off. And when I'm at Salesforce, I'm actually selling to Anchorage Digital, Kraken.
So you're building all these relationships, and you're learning how to talk about different types of parts of the organization because the products are so different. I bet totally different.
100%. But when you're selling like Oracle,
well, we didn't talk about this. That's cool. I didn't know this part. Keep going. This is amazing.
Yeah. And so meanwhile, when I was at Oracle, man, I was maxing out my credit card because I was living at home to save money at the time, right? I was maxing out my credit card to buy Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? And I mean, it worked out for me, right? But what would happen is that was the only thing you could do with crypto at the time, was just buy it and hold it.
Buy it
and I was like, man, I really want to work in this cyberpunk space, this like libertarian space. Like, this is cool. Like, you guys are punk rock, but rather than just like tearing down the system and then letting the ashes burn and that's it, you're actually thinking, here's how we can replace it with something better.
Infrastructure.
Right? Infrastructure, right? And at the time, the space was so nascent and small where you didn't really need go-to-market folks. You know what I mean? There was no salespeople being hired.
No, there wasn't.
There wasn't at all. And then I start seeing Alchemy getting fun. We're the AWS of crypto, of Web3, of blockchain. I was like, AWS sounds like SaaS.
Sounds like software. Yeah, exactly. Sounds like there's gonna be a sales team.
I can sell SaaS.
So did you reach out to them?
So I reached out to them.
Sweet.
And I remember I have a.
It just shows you, if you want, you have to create the opportunities that you want in your life.
Totally.
You were moving, you were growing, you were expanding, you were hitting a ceiling, and then you're like, what do I do next?
It was at the time for me, and you could ask my parents about it and my friends about it, right? When I got the interview and the conversations with Nikhil, who's our CEO, I sold out for this position.
Sweet.
Right? It was like you finally kind of figure out what you want to do and where you want to kind of stake yourself for like a long time. And so day in and day and night, I was preparing for this interview, studying, talking, research.
Wow, that's cool.
It was amazing, man. And I even flew up. They're like, hey, you could do the interview remote. I was like, no, it's important. I want to be there in person. I want to make that impression, right? So I flew up to San Francisco. I go to the interview in person. I crush it. I feel like I'm crushing it. You know what I mean, right?
You flew out for the interview.
I flew out for the interview. They're like, we could do it remote. I was like, no, I want to be there in person. Like, I think I do better in person, right?
Dude, you break that whole third wall of the screen. It doesn't mean anything when you're in front of that screen. It's your energy when you're face to face.
Screens are like, it's like I feel like you told me this. It's kind of like when you're in a band or like a rock band and the drummer needs to be on cue to keep the rest of the band in rhythm. And even a small lag or delay throws
the whole thing off.
Everything off. And when you're on Zoom calls, there's that like inherent lag and delay. There's the inherent, I'm not paying attention. I just got a ping, right? Or like I'm in the Zoom, I'm talking to you and I'm just looking at myself.
So you sold all, that's the worst part. I don't like that
the worst part.
So you sold all, you did the interview, you knock it out of the park.
Knocked it out of the park.
Are you one of the first few salespeople?
Yeah. So I was the first go-to-market hire
Wow, sweet.
At Alchemy. There was a person above, like kind of like the organizational like head to sort of build it
Right,
all
but
out.
you're the grassroots. Go
Right.
pitch 100. Here's all these people. Call them all. Set
Boots
up.
in the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trenches. So we built out the team from 15 people, and now we have like a post-sales org and all this stuff. But I'll tell you what, after that interview, I sold out for it. I remember I called my parents, right? Because there's few things in your life, I feel like, when you really give it 100%.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Where you can really say like, man, I actually gave it my all.
You narrow in all of your energy.
All of it, right? And when you do something like that, and you know that about yourself, and you have that truth, you kind of say, you know what, whatever happens, but at least I actually
knew that you gave it your all.
Knew you gave
You're
it your all.
Cool with whatever happens.
Cool with whatever happens. I remember I called my parents, like, how'd it go? I started crying because I was so happy. I was like, you know what, I'm telling them this. And so whenever things at my job get hard or tough now, I remember that feeling.
It's an anchor.
It's an anchor, because there's that saying where it's like, it's funny, the you a year ago would be so proud and happy with where you are today. Like, don't forget how much effort it took to get here. It's like, stop looking in the future. Take a moment, take the present. And so when things get tough, I always remember that. And
that's
so
cool.
It's been the best life-changing experience of my
For someone listening right now, I think the question that I would have for you is, what are the hacks to winning in an interview? What are the two major hacks to winning in an interview?
I think, I think for winning an interview, there's a couple of things. I think coaching is really important in the interview. Try and get it as much as you can from the other person. At that time at Alchemy, this was like one of the first interviews they were doing. So they're still trying to figure out their process. I remember I got the take home, and I'm talking to the recruiter, and I go, so when you say this, do you mean XY or do you mean ABC? Right. And I could,
that's like you're activating their brain to coach you.
Well, like, what are you looking for?
Way, yeah.
Right. Like, cause I don't want to do the assignment and you'd be like, oh, you to interpret it that way. We were looking for this. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came on the other side of it, right, when I was interviewing other people, I can't tell you how many times that happened where they would do the take home assignment. Right. And it'd be like, hey, let's like take a pause here. Like, this is what we were kind of looking for in the assignment. Like, maybe we do this over again, or why did you think X, Y, and Z? Like, getting feedback on it. So I think coaching, like, understand the game that they're playing.
Yep.
Like, what do they really, really want to see? And then I also think too, like, the other important thing about interviews, and I think it's true like within life, and it's like your cognitive behavior of like, okay, being understanding, like loving yourself, like being the best friend to yourself too.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, thinking about it, I was the first go-to-market hire. Alchemy is a high-performing team. They could have said no to me for the smallest nitpick reason. And that's okay, right? Maybe they hire me later down the road. Maybe they never do. I move on with my life too, right? But also understanding that sometimes when they're looking to hire the first go-to-market person, it's such an important hire that like a lot of people, when they're used to big companies, they go, oh, I didn't get the job. I made it to the final round interview. I must have done something wrong. And it's like, no, maybe you just weren't a good fit. It's like dating someone too. Right.
Right. So show up with yourself.
Show up with
be
yourself.
Represent yourself.
Exactly. Like, imagine if they were like, and Alchemy's not this, but imagine if, because I wanted to be agreeable and get the job, and that was the outcome I was just focusing on.
Oh man, that's a bad place to start the agreement.
Right.
With the company you're working at.
Right. Like, and rather than me being like, okay, I want to find the best place for me, right? The best place for me. I'm like, I just want the job. That's like with the game you're playing. And then you get caught up and suddenly you take the job. But imagine if they're like, hey, we're very serious here. We wear a suit and tie every day. Is that cool with you?
On Zooms.
Yeah, on Zooms. and believe me, we check to see if you're wearing suit pants too.
I was going to say, no pants.
Right? Like, we're a very stern company. And I was like, me too. I'm very serious. Like, and I'm not. Right? Mm-hmm. That would have been a really bad fit and I would have been miserable.
Yep.
Right? So that's my advice for interviews.
I like those two hacks. That's good.
And that's how I think you can do well with interviews. I mean, dude, I remember I interviewed for a job in college, and they had this personality test, behavior test that they, like kind of like, are you Myers-Briggs or something like that, right? These situations. And this lady called me, and I made it to the final rounds. Everything was great. And she called me. She's like, yeah, we're going to pass on you because based on your answers, you don't work well with people. You know, you're like, you know, basically like antisocial, which I'm like the farthest thing from. And she's talking to me and I'm like, wow, this is like really shocking to me. I've never heard this before.
Did you say this to her?
Yeah, I saw, and I'm trying to tell her, and she's like, I'm sorry, please stop talking. Like, I'm trying to tell you, right? And I was like, oh, I seem like the person you're telling me I am, you know, because I'm like, whoa, no, you're wrong.
Ma'am, are you projecting?
Yeah, you're projecting. So, I mean, so thankfully I didn't get that job, but yeah, so that's my
You got to
advice.
endure a lot of pain. You got to endure a lot of rejection. And sometimes you have to be cool with not being able to overcome that objection because it's just misunderstanding or misalignment straight up, right?
Oh yeah.
Like if you're like, for me, when you're raising money or when you are hiring people, sometimes you're on the side of the hiring and you want to actually give someone a job and you can tell that they don't want it as bad as you want them to want it.
Right.
That's also very uncomfortable.
Oh yeah.
I think you have to experience a lot of this pain and rejection in life and take it the way you're saying it. Like, oh, I'm grateful I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that didn't work out.
Yeah. There's a saying where it's like, thank God for my bad luck for having it not turn into worse luck, essentially. Right.
Yes.
Like, oh, hey, maybe this bad thing, if had it gone good, could have been something terrible for me. Right. And I'm sure like, just like an interview for you, like when you're fundraising, talking about like power relationships, like the interviewee, founder, the investor, right. I feel like you have to be very critical about who you take money from.
Very much.
And it's like a marriage, right? And I feel like sometimes maybe early founders are kind of like, please, right? Like, I don't care who it is. Give it to me. And I think it takes a lot of discipline and restraint and professionalism.
I've gotten off of calls and been like, if that person wants to give money, we will not accept it.
Right.
Because it's like that statement you just said, you know, something bad could turn way worse.
Totally. 100%.
This is our lives, dude. Like we love the work that we're doing. We create goals. We iterate on them. We are expanding. We're stretching ourselves.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what you want to do this year. What are you moving into? What are you challenging yourself for personally? What's on that list this year?
Yeah. You know what? I think for me, this list is like, what I really want to do is just continue to build things from the ground up and making early bets. Right. And I think that's one of the best things about alchemy. That's allowed.
I'll say you have that autonomy.
You know, look, I wouldn't say, you know, I'm the one that's making these decisions.
No,
right?
But you have the autonomy to be creative and circulate ideas that get entertained.
Absolutely. Right. Like I think for me, look, I'll put it this way. One of the biggest lessons from Web3, you look at the best teams in the space, right? I'll call out Magic Eden because I think they've done a fantastic job of everything lately. They shipped new chains for their NFT marketplaces, right? They got on Bitcoin ordinals when no one else did, right?
Touché.
They launched a wallet, right? Because they were smart. They're like, hey, wallet is one of the best business models in Web3. You can take fees off of every swap. MetaMask makes $200 million a year off of swaps, I think, at least, right? Like, that's a super sustainable, protected business model, right? And so they launched their wallet, right? And who knows what's coming up next, right? But this team, they were just shipping, and they constantly were shipping. And maybe when they launched Bitcoin ordinals, maybe that fad died down in a few weeks, right? Or maybe it sticks. But the problem with Web3 is attention shifts
so quickly,
right? And you always want the spotlight and the users focused on you and to facilitate those needs. Sure, some of these bets don't pan out, right? Like maybe ENS domains, right? Or like
good point.
Something like that, or unstoppable domains so much, not to, you know, single them out, but like that type of idea.
But they could win it too. We're just saying like there's certain bets that people make, and when you make that bet, you're kind of stuck in it,
right?
In some ways,
right? Like a lot of people wanted to support identity, like projects in their application, and that was an early bet, and you know, it just hasn't really panned out yet, right?
No, it's also kind of like anti-Web3. Like identity is that you own your identity, and most of these they were focusing on identity. You're stuck in their world anyway.
Of course, yeah. I think there needs to be, for identity, by the way, in Web3, almost like a one pass for your identity and like private keys of like, these are all Daniel Budzinski's wallets.
This is where I do everything.
This is where he does everything, right? And it doesn't matter if he loses this wallet or he changes from like a MetaMask to a Trust wallet, right? We know this is Budzinski's written all over this one.
Yeah,
You know, right?
Who's going to crack that code? That's a big one.
Yeah, right. But like, I think the lesson from Magic Eden is like, you gotta be scrappy. You gotta ship things fast. You gotta make business decisions when you don't have all the answers or the context.
And you need people like Kyle in your world so that on every layer of the organization, people are pushing new ideas. This is because I also believe that the sales team, the people that are interfacing with customers, are the ones with the most relevant ideas.
100%, right? Like I had this theory a while ago, and it's proven to be relatively true. Of like, okay, Alchemy is like a pretty democratic infrastructure provider, meaning like any use case in Web3 could theoretically use us, right? Like we're pretty use case agnostic in that sense. And it was always like, well, what do we build next? What do we build next, right? And I was like, well, what if you just used VC funding announcements, right? And you indexed on that, like into categories, right? Oh, a lot of like, hey, did you guys notice like $500 million in the last year went to data indexing services? Why is all that money going there? It must be a market pain that hasn't been solved yet. That must mean there's probably a pretty big TAM, right? Maybe we should consider building
a tool that supports people going to market quicker in that area.
Right, exactly, in that product suite, right? And you can kind of then understand and tell like early on where people are making like big bets and where these plays are happening. For example, when Caldera, Conduit, and there's a bunch of other providers now, but you could tell like, wow, app chains, rollups as a service, like we're going to have thousands of chains, not even just hundreds, thousands of chains. Whoa, that came faster than anyone could have imagined. And it's like, I don't know, the breadcrumbs were there, right?
Yeah.
Essentially.
But a lot of chains failed. So it was like interesting that like more, like I thought it was interesting that like Arbitrum all of a sudden started being talked about way more, and Avalanche that had been around, like these chains started coming back, and all of them started becoming more relevant. Base became insanely relevant.
Base was like, so Base was probably one of the sickest co-marketing opportunities just by like seeing what happened for the optimism framework I've ever seen in my whole life. And by the way, like Base is, I believe, part of that super chain modular blockchain thesis with in some regards. So like optimism was early on the app chain thesis, like essentially that there's going to be hundreds and thousands of these chains. Who was really early was actually Avalanche with their subnet model, right? Like they kind of had this from the jump. Right, which is pretty amazing.
I know, that's what they had it, and no one. But in the beginning, I feel like everybody that was like watching Avalanche was like, "Well, what do you do with this thing?"
Yeah,
because they were so early.
They were so early, and I think we're starting to see a lot of the early bets that Avalanche made. Because okay, what general Web3 projects need their own block space, like their own chain? Probably games. Right? Like generally games, because it's high transactions, they want high TPS, they want low latency, they probably want like a pretty fast block time. So like for example, like Optimism Stack, I believe you can configure to 1 second block time. I think it's 2 seconds today, meaning that's like when a new block gets published.
Fast.
Right? Well, it depends what you're comparing it to. I think Arbitrum is in like the milliseconds, right?
Well, and it depends on how many transactions you're expecting to have to settle and all that too, right?
And also too, like,
milliseconds is another level, dude.
Milliseconds is another level, but you could argue, and this is what's really interesting is like, obviously like millisecond block time super super fast, right? A lot of stuff is going on, high transaction use case. You don't have to post every transaction on chain immediately.
Agreed. There could be a middle thing where it's hosted then pushed.
Totally.
Then there's multiple sources of truth. Then things don't have any downtime. Then if something breaks, it's actually queuing. It's actually how credit cards work too.
Yeah.
You batch them per day if you're actually the seller,
right,
that actually owns the relationship with the processor.
And by the way, Optimism does kind of have something like that in their sequencer today.
It blows me away like how many layers you have integrated in where the market's going, dude.
Oh, like Alchemy?
Well, not just Alchemy, because you're talking to all the players. You have to learn all of these things. You have to figure out where your solution fits in with all these other partners.
Yeah.
This project's using Optimism. How does Alchemy fit into this worldview?
It's so nuts. And honestly, it's like so good for conviction too, because you can hear what people are saying or talking about, or maybe, some of their critiques and criticisms of the space. Take Avalanche, for example, right? Like to your point, like maybe like, what are people using that chain for? Like it, Trader Joe was popular on there, that like Dex, but what else is there? And it's like, well, Gonzilla Games, Shrapnel, they're about to launch their AAA games, right? AAA games take takes Daniel,
years and years
Squad.
and years.
Yeah, it takes years and years, and it's hard work. And now they're all going to be coming out, right? And Avalanche is also doing awesome things with telco companies like Vodafone and stuff.
Really?
Yeah. So actually, like, it's pretty nuts. Like, one of the biggest Web 2 verticals that are entering Web 3 quietly is telco companies, and they're all doing kind of different things, which I think is like,
what do they want to accomplish?
I think for them, and I don't know 100% like kind of how their business works today, but they're basically like infrastructure today for cell phones, right? And communication, transferring data, me texting you, sending you funny pictures and videos. And you could say blockchain's the same thing, just like a different,
more secured.
Or like it's like, okay, we use the internet to send things to each other, and telcos help do that. And blockchain is a way to transfer value between each other. So they want a piece of that. In fact, it's like almost a way for these telcos to become financial institutions, like JP Morgan.
Well, and a lot of them are, like, with how many people actually pre-buy minutes internationally.
100%.
Those are like, sometimes people actually don't have a bank account. They pre-buy minutes and then resell them, and that's the way that they hold money.
You want to hear a funny story?
It's crazy to me.
There is this guy, and I don't know what happened in the project. I assume they're doing well, but it was like this Web3 project, and the idea was to be able to bring, fiat. How do we get fiat currency in Africa essentially on chain, maybe in like USDC or whatever or something? And their strategy was, well, you know what we could do that's pretty like a stable asset is cell phone minutes. Right. You could buy cell phone credits, and then they could put it in the
more
code.
Stable than the local currency.
Yeah, exactly. And then they could put it on chain. I was like, whoa, that's like mind blowing.
Put it on chain so that the user that bought them can resell them for money.
Exactly.
More stable money.
Exactly. It was a way for them to bridge an asset they could get their hands on.
Man, that's
and
wild.
Enter the digital.
So that's
economy.
just working with a telephone company, right? Network that actually has the minutes and allowing those minutes to be rebought for potentially a higher amount, where the everybody wins.
Or something, right? I should probably look up the name and like put it in and like give them some like a shout out and spotlight here, because I could definitely pull that up. But there is like, it's pretty crazy how Web3 can really change developing economies.
So tell us some of the stuff you're excited about this year, some of those goals. You're creating some ideas with Alchemy. What are some of the things coming out of the pipe?
Oh, like with Alchemy? Yeah. So I think the most exciting thing for Alchemy and for Web3 in general right now has been the rise of like really scrutinizing like user onboarding in the space. Now, to be totally fair, like Web3 has tried to solve this problem a couple times.
Web3 onboarding as in better players that aren't scamming people?
No, like
ease of onboarding.
Ease of like, okay, imagine so I try to tell my mom about like this, hey, you should try and get this thing, like get on this application. I think it was Step-In, right? When Step-In was good. And she's like, okay, like I made an account. And I'm like, okay, now you have to go buy a shoe. And she's like, okay, get my credit card. I'm like, no, you need to get a wallet. Right? And she's like, well, why can't I?
Foreign when you say the word wallet.
Right. Like, why can't I pay with my credit card? Right. And then she's like, okay, well, and then I need gas. So basically, like what Web3 is doing now is account abstraction. So we're abstracting the way they need to have a wallet, right? To get like a MetaMask, like an EOA. So you can do like social sign on, like what we're used to today. Like I can log
sign in with Facebook, sign in with Google. Yep.
Right. We're abstracting away gas that like allow users.
But even the fact, like if you tell a normal person, or like let's say you try to tell my daughter Everly, 9 years old, like in order to buy this thing you have to pay gas. That doesn't make any sense to someone. They're like, I don't care if it's $9 or $9.30. Just tell me it's $9.30. Don't talk to me about the gas.
Yeah.
It's so weird, right? It's like being like talking about credit card transaction fees.
Right.
It's just 1%, 3%, 4%. Okay.
Right. And when a restaurant tells you, hey, we're gonna charge you 3% extra because of the credit card fee, it's like,
you're like, just bake it into the whole thing.
Bake it in the whole thing. You guys look cheap. You know what I mean?
But that's showing how nascent the technology still is.
Right. It's
or how hard it is to find all these service providers to do all the legal requirements to make it compliant and regulation standard. Talk a little bit about how people can connect with you, how they can connect with Alchemy, what you're doing, and just how to even get started in the space. If there's like a bunch of curious questions where a lot of the stuff that you're saying doesn't make sense, where do people get started?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think like if you want to get in the space, first of all, now is like the perfect time to get back into the space. Regulation is looking super, super favorable for cryptocurrency. Interest rates are already going down in Europe. They're probably going to go down again in the United States, which means venture capital fundraising money is going to become, kind of way more accessible now. Yep. And then also too, like, hey, if you're not an engineer and you want to get into Web3, guess what? All the job recs that are happening now, it's a lot of GTM and non-technical people that are
go to market people. Yeah, that's a great point.
And if you are an engineer and developer and you're like, hey, I don't know this stuff yet and want to learn, go to Alchemy University. We have a ton of free courses on there.
Sick.
It's freaking epic. And Alchemy also has a job board, a collective board, and there's also a bunch of other Web3 job board, collective boards. Put yourself out there, message people.
Yeah.
Start reaching out. Like, it really is so unformalized. Like, I kid you not, like, deals and opportunities come about just based on vibes. And I'll leave you to figure out what that really means.
I love that,
dude. And if you want to get a hold of me, or actually, if you want to get a hold of Alchemy, feel free to go to alchemy.com, hit us up on socials, send us an email in a general email. We will get to it. Hit us up, go to our Discord. If you want to reach out to me, I'm on Twitter, 0x_Kyle. And I'm also on Telegram at the Color Swag. Is my handle.
At the Color Swag.
Spelled the American way, so just COLOR, not the British way with the U. And yeah, I think that's about it. And I'm on LinkedIn. You can just Kyle Walden. So
if you could speak to your younger self, what would be the 60-second bit of advice you would share with your younger self?
Be more intentional. Like, actually do the corny stuff of like, these are my goals for this year and how do I get there, and these are what values are important to me, and I'm mocking it, but it really is important.
Well, it's corny.
It
seems immaterial.
It's so corny. I used to make fun of people that would do that stuff, and but now you do it. And also, the other piece of advice for myself would be bored. Be bored, be alone, be quiet, be bored, and let your, almost like meditation, like let your inner voice and your inner interests come to you naturally. Don't listen to what other people are saying. Figure out what you really genuinely care about, and just go do it and build it. And the final piece of advice, progress comes through suffering. Get uncomfortable, suffer, fail as much as you can, because that's the only way you get better.
Progress comes from suffering. All right, so like, someone's not in the Web3 space or crypto's, like, explain what is alchemy to someone who has no technical knowledge. They're like an entrepreneur.
For sure. That's a great question. I think like a really simple heuristic is alchemy is AWS for Web3, Amazon Web Services. But what do we really allow people to do and applications to do is just read and write data on chain. Simple as that. So in Web3, your servers, your ledgers are public, not private, right? And so you need different technology.
So instead of building that, you can buy that for a low monthly cost.
Or use it for free. We have like free plans and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's a great place to start. And we also have like education platforms that you can leverage.
What's like a great place for people to create pain in their life that's going to build and have an outcome for them in their now and in their future?
God, that's such a good question. I think the only way to create pain, suffering, which in turn turns into progress for yourself, right, is you have to want something more. You really do. You have to have like a goal and ambition and put yourself out there and fail at it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, how easy would it be for you to, after work or after whatever, turn on Netflix, binge watch, turn on your video game, right? Just be not engaged with the world. And I think you really have to make a conscious effort putting yourself out there, whether that's like networking events, whether that's like learning new things.
That's painful.
Painful, man. Like, hey, I started playing golf. You know how painful that is? I hate myself sometimes. So,
but you did it to create pain, to create a change.
I did it to create pain and create a change. And guess what? Now it's a super fulfilling part of my life. I get to go out in nature. I get to walk and burn calories. I get to talk with my friends and have fun.
Yep.
And then now all of a sudden golf is like this like obscure abstract medium, and it's really just me and my friends hanging out and talking. And we're playing golf. Yeah. Right.
Very cool.
Yeah.
How do you create destiny moments in your life? How do you create those moments where you look up into the sky, or how do you find yourself in those moments that you make that life-changing decision that I'm going to want something new, do something new?
Yeah.
If you feel stuck, how can you provoke that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think like what makes it a destiny moment is after the fact, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're there, or you do whatever it is you wanted to do. And I think for me, my destiny moments have always come when I'm just focused and maniacally working on one thing, focusing on one problem, right? And then that's when all of a sudden things start to click and come together. Like you have to increase your surface area of being lucky, right?
Which is focus and closing out all distractions.
Right, exactly, right? Going monk mode, right?
Monk mode. I like these that you say going monk mode, and you said increasing the surface area to get lucky.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's true, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way to do it. I mean, it's like when we had dinner, that I was manically working on some problems, right? And
we were both focused on we were dialed in on some stuff in our lives.
Dude, it was, I felt like I was at Burning Man, right? Yeah.
Same.
Like, it was wild.
We were on a trip.
Yeah.
That's cool. Habits. It's so easy to create a bad habit. It's so hard to create a good habit. It's so easy to break a hard habit, right?
Yeah.
It's so hard to break an easy habit.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like it's hard when you have a bad habit. It's very hard to break it.
Mm-hmm.
But the hard habits, the ones that are hard to create, the good ones, the ones that are good for you,
it's
easy to be like, I'm not going to go to the gym today. I'm just going to do it tomorrow. I'll just do it the next day. I'll just do it.
Yeah.
So how do you habits? Like what are these habits that you've created? How do people create a better habit?
Man, I'll tell you what. It's a never-ending battle. I'll put it that way, right? Mm-hmm. That's one thing, that's for sure. And I'll say the second thing about breaking a bad habit is, for me personally, it's going slower to go faster, right?
Yeah.
And that may look like, for example, if it's going to the gym, which trust me, I've had my hard times doing that too, because sometimes my work life or my personal life,
you become obsessive.
I become obsessive, and then I say that's a compromise I'm willing to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is not the best thing to do. And so what that means is then, okay, I need to move slower in my professional life and like take that time. Like you got to stick to it, right?
And trust
that it's going to work out. And, remember that even though there's pain in the short term, that there's that desired end state that's going to help you move faster and better.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's
also changing a habit, I think, is tied to your belief system. So I think theoretically you have to slow down.
Yes.
And think about how you're thinking about things.
Yes.
And why.
Yes. Actually, yeah, you touched upon belief system is very, very important. Whether that's like values, convictions, long-term bets you're making. And the key is long-term, because values are long-term, hopefully, right?
Mm-hmm.
For yourself. And it's so much easier to improve yourself slowly but steadily and give yourself grace, right? Oh man, I ate junk food today. I shouldn't have done that. Like, I guess the whole diet goes out the window now. Gosh. But if you have long-term conviction of saying, no, being healthy is important to me because I want to live very long for my children or something like that, right?
Yep.
Then it's a lot easier to look at yourself and go, hey, look, we're playing 365 games.
Right.
And
even looking over 30 days versus just one day, looking over a month.
Yeah.
That's why time is a trap. It's a man-made construct, but at the same time, you can use it to your advantage by some of these psychological things that can actually inhibit you from making the changes.
Totally. I mean, you talked about it on your episode with your brother, actually, the voucher system, the internal bargaining system, right? You have to let yourself...
The cheat codes, man.
The cheat codes.
We're hacking our brain.
Right.
It's not easy to do.
And especially in today's world when there's so many people that are so much better at hacking you than you are to distract you.
Oh my gosh, that's good.
Right? Like you are competing against people and systems that are stronger than you.
That have been around for longer as well.
Been around longer as well. That's in our food, right? That's on our phones. That's on the internet. That's
the media we consume.
The media we consume, right? There wasn't so many problems. You know, a lot of people believe smartphones are really bad. It should just be like a tool, you know, when you're in a room. You know, my smartphone's over there, right? For a good reason, right? I want to be away from it right now, focused on this. But it's too fast of a response and feedback system for humans to just handle purely. Especially,
that's a good point. Like to actually digest it, go through your kind of surrender, burial, resurrection cycle in your brain.
Right.
Information is just plummeting through your brain. You can't actually process it.
No. And it's like Instagram, right? I post a picture of Instagram. What am I doing in 5 minutes? Checking my Instagram. Oh, cool. Got some likes. 10 minutes. Likes. 25 likes, right? Everyone does it, right? Because you're designed to do that, right?
It is designed to do that to you.
That, right? It's designed to do. But before, when I remember growing up with the internet, I was on AIM, maybe AOL, right? Or like Googling things. It was slower. Results didn't pop up as fast. Media would need time to buffer. Not everyone was always online and present. You had a much healthier relationship with the internet back then. Now
you have to manage it.
Now you have to manage it. I mean, look at all the tech CEOs today. Their kids don't have iPhones. They don't have iPads. And isn't it scary how good of a pacifier iPads are for little kids?
Very
Isn't it kind of scary? It's like Xanax.
Yeah, it is.
That you're giving them.
Well, you're actually training the brain to use some type of external reality or methodology to simmer our brain.
Yeah. I mean, it like you said, it's a drug. Music is a drug. It's an escape. Netflix is a drug. It's an escape.
Gaming is a drug.
Gaming is a huge,
and it's about balancing all those. I mean, we talked about it before around when we were in that dinner. We're dialed in and focused on just making changes.
Yeah,
and hacking our brain and just changing things that were normal and now making them not normal.
Yeah,
like if whatever that is, I think you got to jack with your mode. You got to go monk mode.
Oh yeah,
as some would say.
Totally,
Kyle.
Monk, you gotta go monk mode, man. I get uncomfortable doing this stuff too. I'm sure you do all the well. I was at a business dinner this week, literally 2 days ago, and it was Korean barbecue. Which, if you drink a lot of Korean barbecue traditionally, right? I did not. I didn't have a single sip. They offered me, these are people I'm meeting the first time, and it was hard for me to say no because I didn't want to come off as a weirdo. I wanted them to like me.
Just say, "Hey, I'm in monk mode."
I'm in monk mode.
Let's make that. That's awesome, dude. I have a question around just in your life, your work life, your personal life. You hit roadblocks with people, whether it's communication differences, upbringings, whether it's ego constructs where people have been taught or programmed to use shame or interesting rejection or confusion to like kind of spiral people that are creative or ideators or executors. How do you turn that frustrated energy towards someone and convert it into good flow back into your process? Because it's easy to just get frustrated, like you hit a wall and want to blame or talk negative about someone in your brain or someone. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah. First of all, like, it's a battle every day to do it, right?
Yeah, you're going to hit walls with people.
You're going to hit walls. Like,
limitation requirements with people.
All the time. I want to quit. Screw this person. They're an idiot. They're a moron, right?
And you can say those words. What I've learned is I try to reshape even the words that I say because it creates the belief systems that then I'm working against myself about this person that I need to win over.
Yeah. I mean, the reality of it is like, if people, like there's this stupid advice that exists in our culture today. Trust your emotions, like agree with your emotions, follow your emotions, right? Actually, that's the worst advice you could have. Like, and in order to change your behavior and to be a more rational, high functioning person, you have to actually dive into your emotion. This guy said he didn't like this and that made me really mad. And I originally want to say he's a moron, but really I need to take a step back and be like, okay, interesting. Why did you say that? Right? Okay, this is a challenge. This is an obstacle. Why is this happening? Why are you feeling that way? Right? And you can ask that question to them and yourself as well, too. Right? And then that's when that's when you're gonna actually find like the truth and real opportunities of growth as well, too. Right?
And learning how to work around those things with individuals.
Exactly.
Or when you're not going to be able to work around those things.
Completely. And then you need to find like an alternative solution.
Or you need to be, here's what I'm realizing. Sometimes you have to be okay with realizing that there's inefficiencies in relationship.
Oh my God.
There's especially in work relationships or personal relationship where you're trying to accomplish something.
Totally. Right. I mean, we see this a lot with companies or successful people, huge survivorship bias, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you might look at like the founder of Snowflake and be like, wow, everything just went his way. So easy, you know.
You zoom in on the story though.
But you don't zoom in on the story. It's like these people that they think like, oh, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, they all got huge like loans from their parents to start this up. And it's like, really? Like 6 figures is what's stopping you from launching SpaceX? I don't think so. You know what I mean?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's all human. It's all communication stuff. It's all relationship driven. It's all how they prioritize not being frustrated, staying in the frustration, staying in the negativity, but converting it in.
Totally. Right. Like I think it's bad advice if people are like, oh, you're like, especially if you're a founder, like if you're an employee, maybe it's different. But like if you're a founder and you're like, oh, this is just really tough. I'm so stressed and mad about work. I'm going to go get a nice dinner and go see a movie. It's like, no, address it head on.
Every day. Don't address it head on is the way.
Address
even
it.
for staff members, man, even for employees. If you want to be the best version of yourself, I think hitting it head on is taking risk and communicating.
100%.
And seeing how the culture may reject you and you may get fired.
Right.
But that may be a good thing, not turning into a worse thing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Kyle, awesome to have you on the show. It was a blast, dude.
Thanks so much, Daniel. It was super fun too.